So welcome everybody, I'm Kai Savats. I'm here for another episode of All Access with the Newton Brothers, with Taylor and Andy here joining me. Guys, it's so great to see you again. How have you been doing?
Oh, been great, man. So tthank you for having us here.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And doing well. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so it's so we're here to talk about Midnight Mass. It's one of the best shows I've seen. I mean, in recent memory. I think what you guys did with Mike is just brilliant, and it's one of the most emotionally affecting series I've seen in a long time, and I really hope people who haven't checked it out definitely seek it out. So let's but before we jump into that, I want to play a little game that I kind of started. I interviewed Matt Margeson and Dom Lewis, who co-scored the Kingsmen together, and I always thought it was, since you guys are a traditional duo here, let's play a little composer newlywed game and see how well you guys know each other.
Oh, perfect. I love it.
Pressure.
So I'm gonna just start off. Let's see. Let's just something simple. Taylor, what is Andy's birthday?
Be April 27th.
Is that correct?
That is correct. Yes.
All right, Andy, your turn. What's Taylor's birthday?
Taylor shares Jesus's birthday, December 25th.
Okay. Wow. Christmas baby. All right. All right. That's pretty good. So Matt and Dom did not get that. There was.
Oh, wow.
All right. So what is Andy? What is Taylor's favorite snack or like junk food that he goes to?
I mean, is coffee considered a junk food?
Because I would go-to.
I would say it's going to be coffee or ice cream if we're getting really junky. Those would be his two, I would say.
Oh,
Taylor.
Man, that is spot on. Wow. That is right. That's in the money right there.
So coffee, ice cream together, then you're in the money.
I'm okay with that too. Yeah. I usually like them separate, but I'll take them. No complaints.
All right, Taylor. Andy, what is Andy's go-to snack or junk food?
He's good about it these days. I don't ever see him actually eating it too often, but I'm gonna have to say donuts.
Yeah,
that's your vice.
That's my go-to. Yeah. Anytime we finish a project, it's always late at night when we're delivering the last of something, and I drive to get donuts, and I always order more than I'm going to eat. I get like 6, and I have like a bite of all 6 of them, and then I feel sick the whole next day. But that is correct. Yes.
Nice. All right. Let's do something a little bit musical. Taylor, what is Andy's favorite instrument?
Ooh, I think he himself is going to debate this one. I'm going to say today, piano, but maybe growing up it was guitar, but today it's going to be piano.
That's an exact answer. That's correct.
Yeah. Okay.
That's exactly right. Yep.
Andy, same thing. What is Taylor's favorite instrument?
I think Taylor's favorite instrument is probably going to be like the combo of sitting at the piano or sitting at one of his 25,000 vintage synthesizers. I'm going to say that's probably, yeah.
They're kind of, absolutely. That is true.
All right, man. You guys know each other inside and out. I wouldn't expect anything less, but all right, let's wrap it up with outside of music, outside of work.
Yes.
Taylor, what is Andy's favorite hobby?
Oh, he's a lot. But I would say today, being practicality, I'd say probably running.
That's it.
Oh,
ran this morning. Yep. That's it.
Nice. All right.
Yep. I love it.
Running out, doing the running.
Yeah.
And Andy, what is Taylor's hobby outside of music and work?
He's really good about going to the gym, but also walking the dogs. Like it's like a subtle thing, but I think and actually he's always into walking his dog, even like 15 years ago when we were working together. He had a whole thing with his dog about chasing squirrels, and he'd be like, get him, and it was like a whole thing. So I'm gonna say walking the dog, actually.
Oh man, that sounds terrible. We get all these protests of human rights or dog rights, animal. Yes, that's correct. Running, walking the dog. Yeah.
His dog would never get the squirrel, to be fair. It was more just like a fun game, I think. Yeah. So
it's a hound,
Yeah.
Well, perfect. All right, you guys clearly know each other inside now. You guys you're together all the time, so I wouldn't expect anything less. So let's just jump into Midnight Mass. It's one of my favorite series of recent memory, limited series, of course, and And but you know, we've talked in the past, we've had a few interviews, but for people who are maybe listening for the first time, you guys have an amazing collaborative relationship with writer, director, producer Mike Flanagan. So I'm curious, you guys have been working on all of his stuff since, was it Oculus? I think, was that the
That's
Oculus.
right. Yeah.
it was Oculus. So just revisiting, what can you go take us through the time of how you met Mike and how did you get involved with working with him?
We met Mike actually. Oculus was the first time. There was a bunch of composers going up for the job. We were on the list to meet with him, and we had a connection, I believe, with the music supervisor. And so with that allowed us to have a meeting, and then we just they showed us a clip of the film, and we just started kind of talking, and we hit it off really well with also his producer, longtime collaborator Trevor Macy. And so we kind of all just really got along really well, and we were both really impressed by the film, and that sort of led the spark to other music. And you know, we're all close in age and taste and alike, so it just really you know, inspired sort of more talking points, of course, which is great when you're first trying to get in there, and it came really naturally.
Yeah. So Andy, would you like, was the chemistry like right off the bat? There was no growing pains or anything?
Yeah, it was right off the bat. It was we were off to the races with Oculus, and it was fun to collaborate with Mike. He has good ideas. He's a musician himself, and it was just that the connection was yeah, like Taylor said. I think the fact that we have similar, like we were over at his house pre-COVID at some point. And it's just funny, like Taylor was like rifling through his like vinyl collection, and like Flanagan's vinyl collection is the same as our vinyl collection. Like we like all the same, like, you know, obscure and popular sort of things, both film and non-film related. So that's helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, you guys have done, I mean, everything you've worked on, I mean, I just absolutely love, because even though I guess the genre that you guys would be working in is horror with him, I kind of hesitate to call certain stuff that you work on like horror, even Midnight Mass, even though it has horror elements and takes a lot from the genre. It's such a character driven, emotional, dramatic thing. And you guys definitely, I mean, break that box of what a genre can be. So let's jump into Midnight Mass. Everything about the whole series just feels so meticulously crafted, and I think that goes with everything that Mike does. So I'm curious how that kind of extended down to the score. What were the kind of first discussions? Because I know he's been wanting to make this for a while. I mean, he was dropping Easter eggs about this in, like, you know, Gerald's Game and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
why did it take so long to get to this point? And what were the first conversations? When did you learn about this and start working on it?
He had mentioned it off and on, as you said, in projects that came up, and he didn't really get into details about it, you know, and until it was brought up about possibly making it, at least brought up to us. It's even possible that he might have maybe got close to making it other times. I'm actually not certain on that. But essentially, he started chatting with us about it. I feel like it's been in his head, and he's probably had variations of it for probably 10 or 12 years, if not longer, right, Andy? Something like that?
I think so. Yeah, I think he had the idea for quite a while. Yeah.
And Mike in general he's very meticulous with his, you know, because he's a writer, he's an editor. So he comes from so much expertise in all his backgrounds. He's done them all at such a high level that I feel like this particular one, he was very close to him personally. And so he had a lot of things that, you know, maybe experiences or stuff that he felt that would, you know, a part of him in this. And so it meant a lot to him. So the music obviously needed to be exactly right. And I think originally, I believe we were only going to do hymns and no score. It was going to all be hymns. And that, like many things, you know, things change as you're going about it. So that then expanded to the score. And but Mike was very, very, very specific about certain hymns he wanted used, about them sounding, I'm sure Andy will tell you about the authenticity of them sounding humble and not being just this incredibly professional choir, because it wanted to sound like it was genuine. So I think there were so many elements of that all the way through. And that, of course, translated to the score, because the score really needed to match the, you know, the choir and sort of the feeling of being on the island and stuff. And Andy was there, so I mean, he has firsthand experience on.
I recognized that organist pretty quickly.
There's Timmy the
I was
organist.
like, oh, there's Andy. Well, quickly, Andy, how did that I mean, I love seeing composer cameos. I think the biggest one I've seen was Desplat, I think, in Monuments Men, who had like a full-on character. But I'm curious, did Mike was like, hey, you want to be in this, or were you like, hey, can I jump in? Like, how did that come up?
Yeah, it came up. We had a call about this, I think, a year before they went into production, or 6 months. And he just said, well, I want one of you guys to be the organ player. And it just ended up being me, because I grew up in the Catholic Church, so I already knew all of the hymns. So that's sort of how it happened. And then when COVID came up, it was a little tricky. It was almost like it wasn't going to happen, just because it was tricky to get up there. But it all worked out, and it was a lot of fun. It was it was wild. It's super stressful. I have such huge respect for production. Like, the chaos is just like, I mean, we all deal with chaos, so it was good to see their chaos, because I prefer my chaos here, where I like know the chaos, because the chaos on set is just, it's wild. And it's not like an uncontrolled chaos. It's just like there's a lot of things that all have to converge at once, and it's like it has to happen in this window of like, and rolling, and you're just like, oh god, oh god,
He definitely knows, man. He's in on it. He knows that stuff.
There's the near my god to thee scene, that's the sort of one of the pivotal scenes sort of towards the end, and we're all standing out there looking the way we look based on what has just occurred. And I remember they have like 3 of the main cameras, and they would always like, I was always like off to the side of a main camera, never on a main camera. We're out in this field, and I'm singing what everyone is following along to, because I've got the track in my ear, so I'm singing so everyone can match what I'm singing. And Michael Fimignari and Flanagan are standing there figuring out something, and 2 of the main cameras get set. Like, this is going to be on Henry Thomas, and then this is going to be on Michael Trucco. And then Flanagan goes, we have one more camera, and Fimignari's like, let's put it on Grush. And it's so nerve-wracking, because then this big crane comes in. You've got this huge, I don't like attention ever, so the camera's in your face, and they're like, that's great, and then Flanagan says, good luck with that, and he walks away. That's what he said. And I looked over at Henry Thomas, like kind of nervous just about like what was about to occur. And Henry's great, because he's just so professional, but also just so carefree. He knew I was stressed, and he just gave me a look, and he just said, it will all be fine. And he like did the thing with his hand. He said, it will all be fine. And then he went back to character, and he's in this big emotional thing. Anyway, that's sorry, awesome. That was a longer story.
No, that's an amazing little story from the set. That's amazing.
A lot of fun. Yeah.
So, but jumping back to the hymns, talk about that process. And you mentioned that Mike had hymns in mind, and I'm sure you were very familiar with them. So talk about the process of choosing the hymns, and then at what point, whether was it through spotting or whatever, did you decide like, oh, we're going to need score at a certain point?
It was literally a middle of the week phone call from Mike at like 10 o'clock. He called and said, hey, so, we're getting in, everything's been shot. The hymns are in, things are working. The hymns are working. And he just said, I think we need to explore some score, and kind of gave us carte blanche to, was open. He told us what he didn't want it to be. He said, it's, it can't be this big, overly broadcasted, like dun 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 score. It needs to be what the island is, and that's, I felt very grateful to have been up there, because I don't know that I would have fully translated what the island was without being up there. Like the attention to detail of even an umbrella, like not just an umbrella when they're out in town, like fixing a generator, but a specific umbrella because they're used to the rain, unlike us in LA who like lose our mind with like a little rain, right? Yeah. And that translates to the score in that that's how the performances need to be the people of the island. Like nothing can be, that's not to say things should sound bad. It's just that things should be imperfect in a way that like, every Monday morning is imperfect for every human on the planet. Just like things aren't going exactly how they should. So that was sort of the beginning of the process.
And the priest too, when there was a priest on set. So it
Yeah.
was like the authenticity level of certain things and running it through. We really wanted the same on the music side with the score, even though we did our, went into some of our own things, we still wanted the basics to have, we use organ, we use harp, and we use some of our chord progressions kind of go into this similar stuff that some of the hymns do. So that way feel cohesive. And I think that was, intentional.
Yeah, and
Now-
there's a great scene where Mike wanted to use Holy, Holy, Holy as a montage piece, but wanted it to start as source. So like we're in church and there's, I don't remember, but maybe it's supposed to be a smaller attendance, like 10 people singing Holy, 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 and it transitions into a montage. So the hymn then transformed from being people in church to being score, but elevating it just a little so that it doesn't all of a sudden sound like this odd shift, but just kind of subtly goes from humble people singing to humble people with a few professional singers.
I love when that happens, when it's done so well, when you go from like diegetic to non-diegetic, and it's just and it hits you emotionally like that. So was there like a roadmap of like, you mentioned that he wanted that specific hymn for that scene, but was there a roadmap of like where these hymns are going to be placed, and then talk about recording them, because you made the score and the hymns all work, they all seem coming from the same place and everything. And what was the technique or the approach you wanted for the hymns and how they were recorded?
Yes and yes. We it was in a script.
Okay.
The hymns, most of the hymns were in a script, and we ended up actually writing. Andy and I would be singing on them, all the parts, and we made these mock-ups, and then they'd use those for timing to sort of get the timing of the beats and here and there. And then of course when Andy went up there and he was on set, that just solidified it as more of like a musical director position, and that aspect, making sure that all it all worked and stuff. But that's pretty much how it's sort of, Mike was very specific about growing and about it, kind of going from this humble beginning to becoming more perfect or less perfect. And I think that was, he had that already set up early on. We just experimented with size and different things, rooms. And then I'll let Andy tell you about the recording, because oh boy, that was Andy lost his voice. Andy actually had to go to the doctors.
Oh no.
Yeah, Mike was very specific. Like the script would read like "Near my God to thee." It would read like "Near my God to thee." Boom, insert like what's happening in the scene. Like next line of the hymn. Boom, what's happening in the scene. Next line of the hymn, what's happening. And I want to say that I want to say Mike executed that 100%. I think in the show with where it was. Holy, Holy, Holy was another one. It was like they're singing in church, like the priest is doing his thing, everyone's doing their thing, boom, and then we cut outside, and then we go to Riley, and then another verse of the hymn is written out in the script. So it was very Mike had a very specific idea of how that should go. Even at the potluck that was happening, I was on stage doing songs, and at one point Mike said, "Hey Grush, let's talk out the timing," because he wanted a specific part of the song to, if you could read my mind, he wanted a specific part of that song to be happening while characters on screen were walking. So like the stage is way in the background where I was playing, but he wanted to make sure that like what was happening on stage was a specific lyric that wasn't scoring the scene necessarily, but he wanted that lyric to be a part of the scene, which is crazy, so then we, I start playing the song and he's like, okay, let's walk it out. Like, and so he and I are walking with the acoustic guitar where the actors would walk, pacing out the scene. It was super fun.
Go.
Yeah, it was real fun.
So when did you lose your voice? At what point did your voice just give out?
I lost my voice at some point. I've always known this. When you sing like whisper, the ASMR, like when you sing like that, it's very bad for your voice. And I was singing at one point, there are stacks of 80 tracks of my voice.
Wow.
And in some cases, like there's kind of a more moody track called Come Darkness. And I had to redo it for timings. Like everything was cool at one point, and then we had to redo it for timings, and then we had to redo other things and change keys of things. So eventually I started having some weird pain in my throat because this was going on for months, and I
Yeah.
ignored it and got through it, and it was done. And then I went and saw a doctor, and they scoped me and were like, oh, so here's what's going on. I was like, oh man. Anyway,
Oh.
it's all fine now, but it was the most singing I've done in a long time.
I bet. I mean, and it's a way, I don't know, the way it sets the mood and the atmosphere and the tone. It's just like everything just works so seamlessly. I think it's just a credit to you guys, and of course Mike's direction and how everything is so meticulous. Like everything like, as you mentioned, that umbrella, it makes so much sense because like every camera movement, every edit, every, the blocking, everything seemed just so meticulous, but it never felt like robotic. It still felt natural and organic, which is something that I credit like the Coen brothers to doing. It's very,
Yeah.
I love that way of it really feels like you're sitting for a story was crafted to be told. So it was an amazing experience. So there was plenty of scenes where action dictates the flow of the scene.
Yep.
But the show is all about the characters and the emotional and spiritual journeys. So, and there's two scenes that I absolutely love, and I think that stand out. And of course, one is Joe Colley's forgiveness scene.
Yep.
Which is scoreless. And then there's the What Happens When We Die monologues towards the end of the series, which were scored. So I'm curious how you approach, what went behind this decision of keeping Joe Colley's scene kind of without music, but then introduced it was very, light-handed touch with the monologues at the end. But those were, they're just so emotionally devastating in completely different ways. But like, I just am curious how the approach of scoreless and we're going to use music here kind of went in.
Yeah, I think, again, Mike is very specific about usually what he's going after, and he's already, he's already thinking with it as he's filming or writing it. And I think sometimes in those monologues and even in different shows we've done with him, he has an idea of music. So we'll discuss that with him. And, if Andy and I feel, especially early on, if we feel strongly about like, oh, maybe music would be great in this, we'll throw him an idea.
Mm-hmm.
But usually, we're chatting about it with him back and forth. And I think, certain scenes were deliberately dry. And then of course, the end was obviously, that was a funny story. Actually, I'll never forget that email. Andy, you should say that. I'm laughing just thinking about that.
Oh yeah. So it's all sort of, it's all a process. Like there's no right or wrong answer at any point. So it's kind of just our job to try things, execute what people ask us to do, but then do what we think might elevate it more. And sometimes we achieve that and sometimes we don't. And in this case for that scene, it's Were You There? Well, part of it is Were You There? It's like a version of Were You There? Right. Mike had asked us to do like a stripped down piano version of it that's very sort of just very open. And we did that. And then we also did a version that was bigger and more filled out. And we sent it to him. And at first, usually he could just hear the audio at first before he puts it into his Avid. So at first he was like, oh, the piano one is great. This other one is way too big. Like that's not going to work at all. And then he sent us an email. I don't know, it was a few weeks later that said like, you guys, the subject said, you guys suck. And then in the email it said, I'm sitting here bawling my eyes out. Like, I didn't think this piece of music was going to be right for this. And it really worked. So, thank you. And anyway, so it's nice to have things like that work out because, it's all a process, and it's nice to hear that it resonated with you as well. I think it's that whole, everything about that, the acting, the writing, it all really came together.
Good.
Yeah.
I mean,
my favorite sequence.
The gentle push in throughout the whole, and the way they parallel each other, and it's a testament to the series. For anyone wondering, it's not like pro-religion, anti-religion. You have a kind of, it's just about the human journey. And I myself as an atheist, I completely connected to it, and it was just the most devastating emotional thing. But also just the ending and how it wraps everything up. And I don't want to spoil really anything because it's a series that needs to be watched and discovered and experienced. And and then the Robert and Nara scene, the Joe Colley thing. I mean, that just was so. I remember the first time I saw that scene, I was just
what happens in that scene with the
Oh
two
my
of them
God.
is just, I mean, they're
Rips.
both incredible actors, and you just like, you
Yeah.
feel like you're transported there with them in that moment. And that's a tough, like, oh, that's a tough thing to do, you know.
You
That's
guys
I
got a
can't
Hill
even
House
imagine.
too.
I can't even imagine filming that. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's just like the emotional. I mean, it's just so raw and authentic. And I think the correct choice was no score, because it just felt
yeah,
so. It would have taken you, I think, out of those performances. And
100%.
yeah,
agree. Yeah.
Yeah.
absolutely. I do want to mention another kind of thing, and I'm trying to remember. Was it the way every episode ended? Was it? I can't remember if there was end credits music on every episode, but there were some episodes that just kind of the scene. It felt like the scene just continued, and then the credits would roll. And I know there's no music on, like, the one that I always remember is there was there was a big death, and then you just hear the crying and the wailing and the water lapping up on the boat, and it's
Yeah.
like that pause there where you're just reflecting on that episode. And was there ever a discussion of putting end credits music to these episodes, or were that idea of letting the scene kind of continue just sonically underneath the credits? I mean, that were there a discussion of, like, did that come later from, was that Mike's intention from the beginning?
I don't know if it's his intention from the beginning. It may have been, but I think when he definitely saw it, he knew that, like, oh, this felt good, because you have to kind of, it's so, especially the later episode, you have to take it in what happens so much.
Yeah.
You're just like, it's super heavy. And
It's
so
very heavy.
yeah, I think it worked really well, sort of having a moment. And because we talked about all kinds of different ways to use music and stuff, and I think we decided, and Mike had the intention, like, let's kind of be subtle there.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I think there was an episode, I think that it was the end of episode 2, and the mixer, who we've worked with on most of Flanagan's stuff as well, Jonathan Wales, who's doing the mixing of the music and the sound design and all the things, he had like concepted this like cool idea at the end of, I think it was at the end of 2. And it's just fun to see like everyone in this process, like doing things that like really elevate the process. And I think he's responsible for some of that cool sort of
Yeah.
weirdness at the end of episodes.
And it's interesting, because I feel like, other movies we've worked with and other composers, you traditionally give your stems, as to the mixer.
Right.
They mix in the stems, and they, with Jonathan, he's mixing, especially for Midnight Mass, he's mixing the choir, he's mixing the score, he's mixing everything. And, we'll chat with him about it on a creative level. Like, wouldn't it be cool to do this or pan this, or maybe we should, sort of have like a retard here. And like, we go back and forth. So it's like another layer of another person sort of working in that, creative process. So it's really nice to have that, team effort.
Yeah, and there should be a documentary actually on what happened. Our music editor Snacky, who's just there's like a genius at what he does. Snacky and Jonathan would work together with all, like, in some cases we would have 200 tracks of like vocals, various things going on to just create sort of the ambiance. And I mean, Snacky had worked out this crazy situation where, we didn't want to tune vocals, like we didn't want them to sound good, but there's also like sometimes you want to make sure things are aligned, like not sounding too bad. And yeah, and Snacky would just get into this like scientific experiment of like lining up 200 vocals all singing the same word, but so that they don't all sound like they're on a grid or anything, and
Right.
it's just, anyways, they could literally do a documentary just about what the two of them did on Midnight Mass, I think.
That's amazing. I love hearing honestly, the past 2 interviews I've had have been a lot of love for music editors, because I interviewed Lauren Balfe. He's like, credit my music editors for a lot of stuff, and Natalie Holt for Loki. I credit my music editors. Like, they do so much, and they're such an integral part of the team. And I think they kind of get pushed aside sometimes from the spotlight, but they are, they can work magic as well.
100%.
Yeah, they're crucial. Yeah.
So, I'm curious, this take that Mike did on kind of the vampire mythology is significantly different than anything I think we've seen in pop culture. And it very much was able to stay away from the traps and the tropes of the genre. And as composers, any of you guys have, you've done a lot of, you're so versatile, but you've done a lot of work in horror as well. So I'm curious, when you have, is it hard to essentially reinvent the wheel every time, you know, or maybe you don't even see it as reinventing the wheel, but like if you come into a project and you go, okay, we have all of film history behind us, and horror is such a, you know, visceral kind of genre where you kind of music is kind of very memorable. Is it difficult to come up with something new and a new way to build tension, or a new way to even lead up to a jump scare or anything? Like, what's kind of the process in your head when you're tackling these new projects every time?
I think what's, you know, what's great with Mike too is he allows us to try crazy stuff, especially early on, and he sort of pushes us to try more things like that. And most of his stuff, as you know, even though it's centered and I feel like promoted as horror, it's really like a drama, or
Yeah. It's
you know
not
what I
like
mean?
full. It's not full on horror. When you say horror, and you think of, you know, like a, you know, like a Conjuring, which are fun. They're great, fun movies.
Which
But
are
they're
great, yeah. Which I yeah, and
so well. Like Bashar's score, and I love James Wan and the whole universe.
awesome.
But yeah,
It's great stuff. But yeah, that's just not Mike's style. I feel like he has these different genres within genres of you know filmmaking, and so I think it allows us to not have to play it so much like a traditional horror score, which is great
right.
because you know you can have melody and you can have these emotional elements. And then when I think with, you know, the horror stuff, he's such a fan of that growing up on the same movies that we are, that, you know, he himself doesn't like the giveaway, the traditional like Sting. And so it's nice to have that sort of, you know, because we've been on films where like we want this to be the loudest jump scare, the biggest jump scare, and you know, and you're just like, all right, cool, but try it this way. Here's this other variation. What do you think? And so, you know, it's nice to have Mike push for that. So I think that's very different about his stuff, that he allows us that. So I think going in, we always know that that's there. I think the part that's for any movie is coming up with like, well, what's DNA of this movie? What's the DNA of this thing? And it really helped us to use the environments, the ocean, and this sort of tension and this kind of it's like something's off, but you don't know quite what it is. Right. As with the score as we played. And then we have this other piece that's more geared to like faith and believing, and you know, what is that? And I think we wanted something that edged a little bit more traditional, and so we tried some stuff, and I think it's just nice to have you know, a teammate and team player who allows you those things.
Absolutely. And just speaking a little bit more on horror, you know, maybe jumping out of Midnight Mass for a bit, I want to kind of maybe use The Grudge as an example, because I think you guys did you know, the Grudge from 2020, which was a prequel / sequel to a remake of a Japanese film series. And if you combine the Japanese installments as well as the American ones, you have like, it's intimidating, right? I mean, how when you look at something like that, like, okay, what the hell can we do that hasn't been done before? And that situation, how different is it when you're like, okay, how do we come up with a new way to do this, you know?
Yeah, it's stressful because you know there's never a moment where you're like, cool, I got this, I know the thing, I'm gonna do the thing with the thing, and like, yeah, because we're the horror guys. It's like I wish it was like that. Unfortunately, it's all like The Grudge and Dr. Sleep are really good examples of like, you know, like Dr. Sleep, it's like, oh, no big deal. This is like taking off from The Shining. Sweet, like piece of cake. Like, how do we do that, but not do that, do the new thing? And then The Grudge, the same thing. To your point, like there's so many offshoots of things to go from. And, you know, most of the time it's usually like a week of Taylor and I like complaining to each other, not complaining, but like, what are we going to do? Well, I don't know. I'm going to try. I don't know. And it's kind of like, it's stress. I feel like that's the most stressful part, is usually those early stages, but it's also the most fun, you know, which
exciting.
is, yeah, because it's like, I think that those are you know, if you're just sitting around on a chair all day, drinking lemonade, like eventually that gets boring, you know? So, and I think that like the excitement of like being scared of each one of these is really fun. And honestly, like, it's like this in life. Like you do more when you're not scared, but when you're, you know, trying to do, when you're pushed out of your boundaries. And that's an easy thing, I think, to say, just like, oh, like push yourself outside your boundaries. But the reality is like our human body and spirit doesn't want to be pushed out of it, but we need to be.
Yeah, we're creatures of habit. So when you
100%, yeah.
So that fear, but that's the whole, that's how you move forward, is you jump out, you know?
Creatures, creatures of excessive coffee drinking.
And ice cream.
Yeah, and ice cream. Yeah. So it's a good. So I think it's the challenges are. I think we enjoy those challenges. It's like really exciting to like jump into those and go like, okay, well, what's the thing? Like, what are we gonna do?
It's the best when because we didn't start off in horror, and it's the best when like it's something that's not horror, that's like it's a giant action thing or a comedy or something, and they're like, oh wow, I didn't know. Like yeah. It's just like everybody loves to mix it up.
Absolutely. And horror is such a, I love it as a genre. And I know we are horror focused, and I don't want to make it seem like that's all you guys do. You do some great scores
no.
And drama and other things, but I know we're talking Midnight Mass, but I think horror as a genre of music, it allows for so much just kind of weird experimentation. You're trying to find different sounds that are not like aesthetically pleasing and stuff like that. I mean, this series, every time I hear the cello just it's just like a pit in my stomach kind of comes up. And
that's Andy playing away.
So I'm curious, what are some of the most unique kind of non-traditional instruments you've used, whether it's on Midnight Mass or something else, that really kind of are memorable? Like it's something that a sound that you sampled that's like it kind of created something, a cool effect. Is there anything that made it into Midnight Mass?
I mean, yeah, we like we get really excited about whether it's science fiction or horror, being able to kind of push those boundaries of weirdness with mixing with traditional, with sort of this non-traditional. We love doing that kind of stuff. And it's funny enough, I was actually walking my dog, and there were these peacocks.
Typical.
There were these peacocks just like making all these noises, and there was probably, I don't know, maybe like 30 peacocks in the trees where I was walking, and they were just like talking to each other and like communicating, and it was really disturbing. It was like this crying.
Yeah, and for anyone who doesn't live in LA, there are neighborhoods that have peacock populations. So Taylor's not in some exotic island somewhere.
I wish. No, yeah, it was crazy. So I just recorded them, and we played with some of the pitching, and we made a sample library. I also took some recordings of some pigs, and we used that. That was a lot of the stuff in The Grudge. You'll hear these like really weird, off-putting sounds out of nowhere.
Squeals are terrifying. Like they're because it sounds like they're dying, and you can just be like holding one, and they're like screaming bloody murder. So it's a very terrifying sound.
For sure. So we used a lot of that, but the peacocks kind of like became a thing. Like the director, who was Nick Pesh, he was awesome to work with, and he was like, what are those? They're those birds. Let's use those.
Yeah. Yeah, there's all those fun things are good to do, and it's always a gut check. On Dr. Sleep, there's a lot of Danny is plagued by the sound of the wind in the book of Dr. Sleep, and so like right away we're like, oh well, we can use wind instruments, but like after about 12 seconds we were like, well that's not real creative. What else can we think of? After a few weeks, we kind of came up with this idea that like he's scared of the wind, but wind is like egoless, whereas like if you play an instrument, it not only has your ego, but it has your lessons that you took and your mood that day into it. So then we got into this idea of a wind harp, which basically just sits there and there's no human input. So there's a big one in San Francisco, and we were like, well, maybe this is a waste of time, but let's go up there. So I went up there one Saturday morning just to see if it would be even feasible. And it ended up being it was the first cue we had approved, actually. And it's in the whole Jack Torrance scene at the bar. And it plays basically one take by itself for 8 minutes, was just the wind blowing. It wasn't from that session when I flew up. We then hired like a professional recordist to go up and record it. And it was like around New Year's Day. And I'm friends with a lot of the meteorologists here in LA. So I had hit them up and said like, hey, can you let us know when there's going to be a wind event in San Francisco? And they hit us up and said there's going to be a wind event. It was a few days before New Year's, and we got the guy up there with the thing to do the thing, and that was it. So it's all kinds of fun. I mean, pointless but very specific.
I remember Andy was like, let's just put this on the soundtrack, because there's a scene where there's wind, and Mike was like, yeah, let's put it on the soundtrack, and it's just wind. And so I checked in to see that, that, oh, Warner Brothers released the soundtrack. Let's see. And so I went and I saw, and like one of the first comments was like, wow, wind, I guess epic.
It's art, it's art.
Gotta love it.
I don't know if you've been up to Marco Beltrami's studio. He has a wind harp up in Malibu, and I think he has something out there. He had like a piano or something just sitting out there rotting in the wind, and he uses that for rotting in the sun and the rain, and he uses that for weird instrumentation. But he has a wind harp there, and it's all over the score for The Homesman. And I think he did something similar where he just had a track, because when you mic it and you get all these interesting textures, and it's such a kind of almost transient, like you're in a trance almost when you're listening to it, and you're just isolated with it. It's pretty unique.
Yeah.
Fun, yeah.
But definitely, you hit up Beltrami. I'm sure he's past Neptune's net somewhere down there. He has a little haven up there of all these crazy instruments.
Perfect.
Go up there, actually. We should go up. We'll bring him coffee, donuts, and ice cream. And
there you go.
Yeah, good little group hang. Yeah.
So looking back at Midnight Mass, are there any scenes, and we talked about a few scenes, but are there any scenes to each of you that were very kind of rewarding, creatively rewarding to do, that afterwards you did it, you're like, okay, we nailed that. That feels good. Is there anything that really stands out from the project?
Obviously there was, the scenes that we've already mentioned, that last scene obviously really affected me emotionally watching it, and the music that Mike liked worked that just really, because I remember watching it and I was at the very end and I was like, wow, that's just really resonates, that all of it coming together. I think on another scene, there was sort of this, when the father sort of getting like agitated and he's walking around at night, and there's this music that comes on and it's one off the track Power of Faith, and it's sort of this constant momentum with this harp, and then we have this weird instrument in there called a therevox, which is kind of like a cross between a violin and sort of a what's it called, blanking on it right now, but like the theremin. Thank you.
A theremin, yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So we use that, and with we had an amazing the orchestra playing and a harp player, and it was just great. And so I feel like the momentum, and it had sort of this feeling of like believing in something, in God, and he was really, really passionate about trying to do right, yet he was doing so much wrong. I mean, and he was sort of fighting with himself, and you could just feel the agony in him, and which I think we've all at moments of some small way have felt. So I was just like, oh my God, this is working out so great, so well. And Mike, obviously he liked it. So it was like, we're like, woo, this is good.
Yeah. And I think for me, it's a stranger scene. It's the beginning of episode 2. It's the first scene that I like scored to picture. And it's the scene with all the dead cats on the beach.
That long one take, right?
Yeah. And it's just there's so many things about it. Like the mayor is like, oh, maybe it's baby sharks, the baby sharks can come, like there's all this crazy dialogue and birds and dead cats, and like that was a lot of fun to score, because it almost felt like it was meant for score to just be like popping its head up, but just very gently in between what was happening. And I mean, it was literally sitting in this room, like starting with one instrument. I first started with the cello and just like hit record, and like probably just played 3 notes, of which I probably trashed one of them at least. And then picked up another instrument. I grabbed, the guitarone was another one in there. It's this like mariachi bass. So I picked that up and then start adding that in the scene. And it all just sort of progressed like almost the way a DJ would begin to introduce elements in like in a club. And so for me, that's like, if you hear it on the soundtrack, it's not terribly exciting, but it was really fun to do.
Then you add Trucco's mustache, and
Trucco's, Michael Trucco, Mayor Wade, his mustache and Henry's mustache deserves its own TV show, actually. Yeah.
No, that scene was, I remember I was watching it, I was like, it's not cutting. He's doing it again. Because you had that really amazing oneer in the Haunted Hill.
That was
I think that's the scene we broke down, Taylor, at was it WonderCon, or I think it was something. Remember, we were on a panel at
Yeah.
LA Convention Center. I think that was the scene we were breaking down. I just remember that one being phenomenal as well. So
Yeah. Yep. It's true. Yeah. That and like the hands, like Mike, Gerald's game, that the hand.
Gerald's game. Yeah.
Oh man,
removing of the skin there. That
loving. Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
loving. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. That's just like, oh my God, guts me every time.
I love it when it's executed where it's not too showy, that it doesn't like call too much attention to itself, but you're just like wrapped in the scene, and it's just like holding you, and it's amazing.
Yeah.
So coming up next, I think you're continuing this amazing collaboration. I think the Midnight Club is on the horizon. Is that something that's coming up next? And I think Mike is also working on the fall of the House of Usher, which is bring him back to his Maryland roots with Edgar Allan Poe. And, and will you guys be joining him on that journey as well?
We are.
Yeah.
They're filming now.
Yeah. So
very exciting.
I know you guys can't talk too much about it because everything is still being made, but I can't wait for those two, especially. So, I mean, those are going to be fantastic series. And guys, thank you so much for chatting tonight, for taking us through Midnight Mass. And it's always such a pleasure to catch up, and I'm a huge fan of your work. So
we have
thank you very much. We really appreciate it. Yeah, thank you. It's always fun to nerd out about this stuff.